stop it.
Get rid of that.
14 people.
Come and learn.
You
hear me?
Right outside of Washington, D.C.
They didn't come and learn. Don't speak.
Wow. That'd be scary.
We got 1 minute, whatever that means.
I have 9 o'clock.
I do too.
Okay.
Nah. God wants me to rip on the Eddie.
Did you see where we now got cameras twice?
No what?
We cameras twice.
We did?
No, we do today and then like next week sometime. The 19th.
Oh.
Must be a week.
I don't know. Do we have to cameras twice? Really? Okay. Okay.
Okay, let's change something. Sorry.
Doug,
Yes,
you're giving
no.
your attorney heartburn. Stop doing that.
That he did on the side.
You know I can't.
If he could control it.
Just on the yes, no.
What he's trying to do is he's gonna set
I'd like to get that 500-pound snowball off of my back.
country with his kids. So, he's also
Here.
able to sell it.
November
Live
14th.
in a house or two.
Yeah.
And then just buy a mortgage.
Here we are.
So he's-
All right, calling the meeting to adjourn. Sorry, I already want to
Second.
adjourn it. To convene, okay. The deletion that we have on our agenda is item 3. Go ahead and delete that, and then we'll go ahead and start with item number 1. Consider canvass of November 5th, 2019 city and school election. Did you get rid of that? This is the one as of yesterday at 3. Should be the final. Should we just go through and read it all? Are there any questions or concerns about the canvas from the board?
None here.
But was it, nothing was changed since election night? I shouldn't say that, I got the results the next day and
There were maybe 5 that changed, but it wasn't,
minor.
yeah.
Did you ever clear up what I got off of the Secretary of State?
You got that from the Secretary of State.
Because
Because when I looked, it was the numbers that I had, so I'm not sure where yours came from.
okay, well, I still have that.
You might wanna look at that again, but what they had from what I sent the night before was still the same,
Okay,
which is what my numbers all came up to.
okay. And then I think there was a question about Greenfield and Allen for a friend of mine out in S23. She had said something about her precinct was missing. that it was lumped in with absentee ballots or something. No?
Hey, this is the first I've heard, and I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Okay, all right. All right, well, I will take, I will take a motion to approve the canvass of
So-
November 5th, 2019
So
city and
moved.
school election.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Tracy?
Scholl?
Aye.
DeCook?
Aye.
McIntyre?
Nay. Okay, the second item on our agenda is consider request from Indianola Chamber of Commerce to utilize fencing on downtown square with possible action.
The chamber sent through a request to use the fencing. Normally, they use the courthouse lawn to post their signs for the downtown events coming up for the holidays. They sent through an application to just hang the banners. I spoke with DCI, they didn't have any problem as long as it doesn't damage the fence, which we're leasing. So there wasn't any issue there. It's just a request to hang those banners through the holiday season, to utilize it that way. You do have a request coming up on the 19th from the Hometown Pride. They're wanting to maybe do some type of art display on the fencing going forward, but this would be temporary for the holidays, so.
Okay. All right, I would accept a motion for a request from, for approval for Indianola Chamber of Commerce to utilize fencing on downtown square.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Tracy?
Scholl?
Aye.
DeCook?
Aye.
McIntyre?
Aye. Okay, item 4 is discussion of Justice Center project. I'm quite sure who to turn that over to.
Nate, do you wanna, that email you sent, do you wanna talk about that?
Sure.
One of the things that, as we're moving forward with the 911 communications, Nate was talking about, and kind of that going forward where the board's moving with it, continuing to go to the rebid. If we do that, Nate was talking about wrapping around those bonds. He sent me an email yesterday about it.
Yeah, so you're talking about the second part of what I was
Mhm.
outlining as far as the structure
Yes.
between the E911 project and the jail.
Correct, yeah.
So part of what we might consider doing, especially if there are original issue premium bonds that are issued by the county, is the dollar prices that drive that premium. The dollar prices tend to be higher on the later end of the amortization. And so a good fit might actually be, rather than doing the Motorola financing over 20 years, which we're still waiting on some information from
Right.
Motorola to even see if we can do the 20-year financing because of the nature of the equipment. If we'd shorten that up to say 10 years or so and kind of view the two projects as one as far as the debt service levy is concerned, we can shorten the amortization on the E911 bonds, and then on the jail bonds, we kind of wrap it around. You think like Tetris pieces work is how I was trying to describe it to Megan, but you'd have the shorter amortization on the E911, and then you'd have essentially deferred principal on the jail project. And stuffing that principal on the back end would actually help generate a little bit more original issue premium, if that's the way that the county decides to go.
Did we already vote on the duration for the Motorola or the 911 bonds?
I'd received guidance to do 20-year financing on that.
But you haven't approved your official statement,
Right.
you haven't done any of that. So we've been trying to get from Motorola a list of useful life for all of the pieces of
Sure.
said project,
And
which
some,
is.
and some of that useful life might not go out 20 years.
Right,
The
but the
towers
towers
should-
certainly are,
Yeah.
or 50
Okay.
years. So, there's a good chunk of it that is, which is reasonable, but I have had difficulty getting the information from Motorola, so I still don't have a chart of useful life.
After this meeting, let's go do a joint call. That's fine. We'll move on it. Okay. I think maybe it would be beneficial at this point, since this says discussion, and we're putting the cart a little ahead of the horse on that, but it's good to know.
Mhm.
Let's actually talk about the project, and let's talk about, I'll just tell so that the public is aware. Here's my general thoughts on it. I think it's premature at this point to say definitively this is the path, this is what we're doing, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because there's things that are outside of our control, such as interest rates, such as the actual cost of the facility. So where the user group and I are working is to continue to reduce the cost of the building. We have another meeting tomorrow, and we don't have unlimited time, but the ultimate goal of that is to get the project out to bid around the holidays with a January, probably mid to late January bid date. I originally thought it might be as early as January 10. I think it'll be closer to January 20, but I don't know that. It depends on when bid packages are ready to go. I'm pretty confident that we're in the 2.5, and depending on how some other things fall, it might get up to 3 or more than 3. And additionally, I think that we have to start looking at some of the items in the facility that aren't day one items, such as, we're allocating, where the prior board allocated some fees to go into the bond. And, some of that's probably not exactly standard for a government building, so we can take a look at that. Some of the other things that aren't day one expenses would be, I know there's a line item for $40,000 for sod and trees and landscaping. If it takes 18 months to build a facility, I don't think that those are items. Furniture would be another big ticket item that building the facility and furniture on day one when you're digging a hole, you don't exactly need to have chairs and tables there. And so I think that there's some other things that we can look at. But a lot of work went into the project to reduce cost, to get the numbers down. And I certainly think that having a bid date in January to actually see concrete numbers, that makes sense. So saying that there's a defined path at this point, this is exactly what we're doing, I think it's premature, because if interest rates get wonky on us, or if the bids come back and it's $38 million, there's no defined path that's what's gonna happen. So I don't think it behooves us to say that's what's going to happen. I'd like to have the numbers in hand. You have 60 days after you get bid numbers, or on bid date, to go to contract or not. Once we have numbers in hand, and since we're 2 months from there, 2.5 months from there, with bid packages in December, I think that makes all the sense in the world to at least look at those numbers, and then we can make an adult decision on what path we're going to do, or what options are even available at that time. So that would be my preference. It is good to know that sort of considering those 2 projects and duration, there's better ways to do things, and so that's good to know. But that's generally my thought. One of the things that I will reiterate to this group and to the public is that there's some trends. There are some trends, and I think we would be naive not to recognize those. And I understand that everyone votes for different reasons, and so in my mind, there's a variety of categories that. Yes, did the referendum for $3.5 million get 55.61% of the vote? Sure did. Do I believe that every one of those yes votes love the project and the idea? No, I don't. I don't at all. I think some people held their nose and voted yes. Interestingly to me, I looked at the numbers from Norwalk, which is in District 1. 70% were yes, 30% were no. An interesting figure to me. But I look at that number, and then I compared it to the other one that was on there, Tracy, the sales tax. Oh, I should read it right. It was confusing, and I'm sure many people didn't exactly follow it perfectly, but the revenue,
The Norwalk
the
question?
Norwalk revenue purpose statement, which was it said, sales tax was in there. And so I envisioned that, that received an 80% approval rate, something about 80%. So that means 20% voted no on that. And what that purpose statement did, or what it effectively did, I think because our school district was required, probably by the statute or the Iowa code for sure, to have a purpose statement, was they receive sales tax money and they build buildings with it. Or they use it how they need to use it, but the statute and the legislature requires them to have a purpose statement on how they use their funds. So it wasn't a tax. It wasn't a, hey, we're gonna charge you more money, or we're gonna increase your sales tax or whatever. It was just the school receives funds and they're going to use those funds within these parameters and guidelines. Well, that got 80% yes, but it got 20% no. So if that's an analogous no vote to, it doesn't much matter what's on the ballot, you're gonna get about 20% or 15% or in that ballpark of it's gonna be a no vote. I found that was relatively telling.
Just so you know, their attorney writes that up. I did not.
I know. And they're just following the rules, and I get that. But my point is, us as a board, for this project or any other project, if you're asking voters, any question, you're gonna get some percentage of no. And that's important because we've seen that in a prior referendum in 16. In 2018, the referendum was 70-30, and you got 30% of no, but I'm saying there's gonna be some percentage of those no votes that are no regardless. Do you know this judge? I do not know this judge. Shall she be retained? No. I mean, it's just the nature of what happens. And so I can't say I was, that it wouldn't have been an easier path to have 4.39% more yeses on this, but it was interesting to me. But here was the trend that I wanted to speak to for the public and the board. $30 million was on the ballot in August of 18. It received 70%. Effectively, $34 million was on the ballot for this location. $34 million effectively was on the ballot, or 35. It received 55.6%. So I need my colleagues to think about that. If the plan is scrapped in a different location and a different amount is pitched on the ballot, and that number, just think with me, is higher than $34 million. Let's say it's $40 million or $38 million or $37 million. We've seen 30 at 70. We've seen 55.6 at 34, 35. Where in 6 or 9 months or a year from now is 38 or $40 million? And are we going to hit 60%? I mean, that's really the question that I think people need to ask themselves is that a viable solution in the event that an off-site location is ultimately discussed, and reaching 60% is difficult. I've said that from the beginning, that's a tall task to get 60%. Clearly, on a Norwalk revenue purpose statement, 20% of the voters said no. That didn't cost them a thing. That was just giving guidelines to the school to use tax dollars. So there's not a lot of margin of error there for a different plan. So those are my general thoughts from for what I think we should at a minimum do. If in the meanwhile there's an alternative plan that Supervisor McIntyre has discussed, and you want to put pen to paper and some flesh it out. I've always been interested in looking at all options, but where I've fallen on this is that if it's more, I don't think it passes. I just don't think it's going to pass.
I think there's more to this issue than just the price.
More than, I didn't quite hear it, more than,
There's more to this issue than just the price.
and that being,
Well, number one, the location. And number two, that the users are compromising in what they want by going on this location.
I think they're always gonna compromise on what they want, I don't care where you build it, but.
To a point,
But
but then take out the users and then look at the taxpayers. When this building moves, which we know it will because we're a growing county, how much is it then? When, if we did it right now, you wouldn't have that future cost, only remodeling. So, that's where I've been this whole time.
So,
I would say, to Aaron's point, yeah, I'd be hard pressed to think you could get 60% off of the square.
I don't think Warren
that's
County
just my opinion.
citizens, I understand, but I think if you give them the viable options and you explain all this to them, there will be more people who are willing to come out. So far, we have not had over 15% vote on this issue.
But that's when it's put on the ballot, I mean.
Right.
Yeah, I would think normally it would have been 7.5 or 8 or something like that, but you had contested school boards and council here in town, so that made a difference.
well, one of the things that I think that the longer this goes, the more frustrated I think that's factual, the more frustrated people are getting.
Right.
Supervisor Shaw made a statement in one of our prior meetings about the proximity to Des Moines and how that 17 miles isn't much of a barrier to put a news truck down here, and they like sensational news. I'll tell you the next story that'll be run. It will start with a drone aerial footage over the square. It will scope the hole. Then they will cut next to probably an Indianola citizen, likely a business owner on the square, who was upset. Then they will take a quote from you, me, one of us, and then they will run that story about 15 times, over and over and over again. And the more that this continues to happen, I think people are getting frustrated. I know that you might not think it's about the cost, but those numbers are telling as far as a trend. And so
I didn't say it wasn't about the cost. I said there's more to this than just the cost. That's what I was pointing out.
So here's one of the things that I saw, and I don't mind taking heat. I don't mind being out there. I try to be honest with people, and it's just the way I am. It makes me not a typical politician. It's easier just to sit there and not say anything and do something. But I want people to understand where I'm at. One of the things that I did note was on the 8th of November, I watched the interviews, and yours was something along the lines of, at this point I think we should scrap it and move to a cheaper location. And that cheaper location, that's a factual statement. Or a less expensive option, or I think that's a less expensive option. It's a factual black and white statement.
What
And so
are you talking about? What interview?
Your KCCI interview on the 8th, in front of the admin building.
Okay, before the vote.
It was the 7th was the vote, the 8th was Wednesday.
Okay.
5th, wasn't the 5th of the vote?
Oh, it was the 5th, sorry, it was the
Whatever.
6th.
It was
6th.
way before
No, it was the 6th.
the vote.
It was after the vote.
No, because I haven't made any interviews after the vote. Not one.
Okay, well, let's go with a cheaper location. It's still a factual statement that's getting out to the public. I'd like to know how we're coming to that, because from my perspective,
Okay.
and if it is, I'm happy to consider it, Chris. I really am. But here's the issue that I see. The county owns the square. Buying ground that to have a facility, a jail with 88 or 90 or 150 or whatever inmates, that requires sewer infrastructure. There's nobody at this table, or there's nobody with any credibility that thinks you can do that on a lagoon system. It is sewer. So sewer is only in cities, as we sort of know. And so we have to be either in the city of Indianola or darn close to it. Finding ground darn close to a city is developmental ground, and so we know that the cost of developmental ground is going to be the best and highest use of that ground. From a city's perspective, from a county's perspective, is going to be something that raises revenue, not an exempt building, not a church, not a county building. And so there's always going to be a push towards best and highest use of that ground. And so anyone who owns such ground, unless they're just being charitable, which the Elizabeth Holland family was charitable in Norwalk, but generally, people are gonna sell their ground to a developer. Hubble Realty, or I saw Kading Property was down in Indianola recently, made the news, because that generates revenue. So the ground is an expensive quantity that, you know, at 40,000 an acre, I don't know how many acres you would project, but I'm interested in putting pen to paper to figure out where we're at or what you're thinking. But I'm guessing it's 40, maybe 50. I don't know, it's not gonna be inexpensive per acre. So if we need 20 acres and it's 50, that's just $1 million easy. If it's 40, it's $800,000, but that's an expense.
Mhm.
I think that while you stated it's not only about cost, I agree with that. But it is about getting 60%.
Mhm.
And if you can't get 60%, it's not a solution. It's a failure is what it is. And to get 60%, I'm telling you, the people in Indianola vote.
Well-
Without addressing that square, Crystal, I don't see the people of Indianola. Anyone live in Indianola? Anyone want to vote for another bond if we don't address the square? Just
Yes.
leave it a hole?
Not leave it alone, but there's other ideas out there, you just need to hear them from the public.
Ideas that cost money though as well.
Well, there's some cost money too.
I understand, but my point is, we have to address
Mhm.
the square.
Yep.
Addressing the square costs money. It's a county square. It's not Indianola's square. It's a county square.
But if we can start those talks with Indianola and possibly bring in a developer and have that developer bring ideas to the table and talk with Indianola and have Indianola's input on this too, since this is their square.
Yeah,
And
so
they are motivated to have an interest in what goes there.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm telling you, any park setting, any whatever, there's dollars to it. So
Right.
it adds to the cost, and what you said was cheaper, and I'm showing we've got land purchase, we've got something to do with the square, or partnership or collaboration or something, but it isn't a free thing. It costs money to do anything. We've got infrastructure, so if you've selected a location, does it have a sewer main large enough to handle the building? If it doesn't, we're gonna have to put that in. I'll tell you that parking squares, Skip, you know this. What does it cost to do a concrete one parking square, ballpark?
I would guess you're gonna be sitting at $45 a square foot.
Okay, so we've got parking. If there's any gravel, the facility's not gonna be on gravel. County's gonna pave to it. What I'm saying is there's box after box after box that are going to be additional costs.
Right.
And so if.
Today, but not in the future. When you move this building and still have to address those issues, which you're placing on the backs of future boards and the population of Warren
You're the only one
County.
who continuously says, we have to move the
Because-
building. Do you think, no, flush
Okay,
that out.
okay.
We're having a
Let's flush it out,
discussion.
yeah.
Let's do it. When you say over and over and over, we have to move the building if it's built here. Based on what? Based on the courts not having, is six courtrooms
That,
not sufficient
plus-
for our courts?
Plus the jails.
And what time frame are you talking about? Because the courts are okay with 4 courtrooms now, expandability out to 6.
Okay.
So 4 for 20 years, 2 more. We're talking, I don't know, Doug, how long does 6 courtrooms last for the courts? Mike, are you talking 100 years from now or 50 years from now?
I don't-
And then
with
why
our
would we have?
growth?
And then why would we have to move the building? Why would the building's never going to move?
We're landlocked. Are we
That-
gonna build from curb to curb on the
That-
square?
That doesn't. The admin building is landlocked. Are we going to move the admin building if we have more employees here? The building itself is never moving. I don't know why you keep saying that, it doesn't make
The
sense to me.
services that are provided in the building, that's what's gonna have to move. Okay, what then do you do with that square?
We'll agree.
And there are so many elephants in the room that you're not addressing. The parking.
We'll-
Parking is going to be an issue on day one.
We'll agree to disagree on the building will move comments. I don't think that that's the case at all.
Okay,
I mean,
well, there's two
theoretically,
things that
could
you
some of
said.
the programming, theoretically, could, probation not have to be in the building? I mean, theoretically, yes, something like that could not be in the building, but will the actual functional facility move? No. Will it be there in 100 years? Yes. I mean,
100 years? The building prior was built way better than this one will probably be built, and it only lasted 80. And we know that they've been transporting inmates for 20 years. So I don't understand when you say that we're not gonna outgrow this building. It's a matter of time before we do outgrow it. There's two things that you said.
Go ahead.
You said that people should not have to hold their nose to vote yes on this. I agree. People should be 100% saying, okay, this is really a project I can get behind. Why hasn't it been that way? Why do we constantly have to compromise?
There is no solution where 100% of anyone is going to be in agreement.
Well,
There is
our
no-
board is perfect of that.
There
Yes,
is
I
no-
get that.
There is no solution. I showed you the revenue purpose statement from Norwalk. It's the easiest yes vote in the world. There's no financial
Right.
cost to it, and 20% voted no.
And
There-
most of the time it's because voters are not completely educated as to what they're voting on. And like you said, most of the time people are gonna vote no regardless of what it is.
Well, the question is, if you've offered a cheaper location to the news and to the public, then
No,
then
Foresight
then-
is cheaper,
then put it
not
out
the
there. So-
upfront costs.
So what do you think the upfront cost for a green site location realistically is going to be? Because the other aspect of the costs that are not built in, that no one's talked about, is this. We have a design for the square location that's been worked on for a little over a year now. That wasn't free, right? Everyone knows that our architect charges the county money to design a building. The 2016, I think we have a view from 1,000 feet up. I don't know what sort of schematics. I'll admit I haven't actually looked at it. But those numbers got forwarded with that programming in 2016, and that came in at about $40 or $41 million. So we know what that ballpark would cost. We'll know in January what this building would cost. So theoretically, you could take this building and move it, pay for the land somewhere else and move it. We have effectively two designs. If there's a third design, but the last one, I mean, what was the cost? $1.5 million, $1.8 million? I mean, it costs money. Is there an architect that's donating
No.
building plan 3?
Right.
So in addition to the $800,000 to $1 million for the land purchase, we'll have to add another $1.5 million to $2 million for architectural designs, correct?
I'd say $1 million, but yes.
Okay, so $1 million. So we're already at 2 plus infrastructure, plus parking, plus sewer, plus whatever else we've got, plus dealing with the square in some capacity, which will cost money. My point is, what number do you think, conservatively? I don't think we'll touch it for under 40. I mean, I just don't think that we'll be under $40 million based on this. And the other issue, we've got two other big issues, is timing. I mean, every year that we don't do something, you're adding,
Another $1 million.
it's gonna be closer to $2 million with construction inflation minimum. So we know that it would take another year at a minimum to design a building, so we're adding $2 million. Nate came after July and said rates have come down since August. 1 percentage point's another about $3 million of financing over the course of the 20 years. It's ballpark. It's close to that, I think. So my point is, doing what you wanna do, we know it's gonna take a year, so we know it's gonna take another $2 million of construction inflation minimum, just to build the building that we had here if we moved that. If we didn't use those designs, we're adding another $1 million to $1.8 million in architectural fees. We're adding the land cost. And so that's how I'm getting, I just want you to see how I'm getting that I honestly think.
I understand all that. I understand that there's gonna be
Okay, so
huge numbers
Yep.
that we're giving up.
Yep, so my point is, I think that the all-in is gonna be starting point in a year from now in the $40 to $42 million range. If it's under 40 million, color me shocked. I don't think it will be. So the question then comes, getting the consensus to 60%. I mean, I'm practical. That's why I'm doing what I'm trying to do. 60%. We already know that if the public sees $40 or $42 million next September or November on the, it won't be November, presidential time, but sometime late next year or early mid-year, what percentage of the 55.6% that voted yes because of the location? I mean, there are people, you would agree with me that there are people that voted yes because they are adamant that they want the building on the square.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Is that 10% of the vote?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but are they gonna be a yes vote on somewhere else? If they're adamant on having it on the square?
I think if they have adequate information and, yeah, I do.
Yeah, I don't. So we're gonna have some percentage of people that love it on the square that are gonna hate it somewhere else. Just like there are people that hate it on the square and would prefer it somewhere else. Those people exist. I'm the first to admit, there's a wide range of folks on this.
Mhm.
But there are some people that want it on the square. And if they vote no, and we have 20% of the people that, let's say it's 10%, let's say a great educational campaign and the 20% of no to everything vote becomes 10%. They're 10% no, regardless of what it is. You're asking for money and they're gonna say no. And then what we have is a trend of $30 million got 70%, $35 million got 55.6%, $40 million. Do we get 60%? Do you think that the voters of Warren County will approve that if it's $41 million, goes out for referendum, change the location, approve $40 million? Do you think we get 60%?
I do.
Okay. Doug,
I
do
don't.
you think they will?
No.
I don't either. And so therein lies the problem.
Right.
But my bigger point in that was, that's what's in my head. That's what I want the public to understand. And I don't feel as though the pulse of the public, the mentality of how happy folks are in the county, that they're getting happier as the price tag goes up. I would posit they're getting less happy as they see the county needs another $3.5 million to get it done. The county now needs $10 million more to get it done. And the issue that I have is that that's the starting point. And so if Doug and I are right and it doesn't pass, are we going out in 6 months at $43 million to finance the building? And if
I see what you're saying.
we would
I
have
see.
to, right?
But this whole project has been a compromise from the get-go.
I get it, but
let me just let you guys continue to compromise, because I'm not going to. I just won't. And I know I'm not gonna convince either one of you to change your mind, so that's fine. My only hope is that the public can bring a petition, but I don't know if they're that involved. So, you're right, I'm kinda stuck in my opinion all by myself, but that's okay. I've been that way the whole time on the board.
Well,
I'll continue.
That's fine, Crystal, but if it's $41 million, $40 million, $39 million, whatever, let's be optimistic, because it's gonna come in hot. If that doesn't pass, Dallas County did 4 referendums where it didn't pass. So just so the public's aware, if we start at 40, and a year later, at 5% of 40 is what, another $2 million? A year later, it's 42. 5% of 42 is, $2.5 million. Now we're at 44.5.
Well,
And Nate,
I didn't create the compromise,
I
but
get-
I'm willing to do the
and-
hard work
and
to
ne-
get it undone.
And in fairness, Crystal, neither did I.
But I understand.
I'm here
But
to.
I'm trying to go back and do what's right now.
So
But
running
it's not
out.
gonna happen.
Yeah, but running out that scenario, if the voters don't go for it, I mean that's.
Are you
that-
thinking that by creating some kind of unity on the board that we can get this project better press or something? Is that what you think? Because it's not unity of the board, it's the board doing the right thing, period. That is what brings or doesn't bring the news here.
I think a majority of the board is trying to prevent a nightmare scenario where
I
40
understand what
becomes
you're doing.
42
I
and 42 becomes
completely understand that.
45.
Yeah.
And if Nate's right and 1% interest rate, at some point rates might not be in the basement of historically low. And if they go up a percent and we're 2 years out on this, plus the year of design, 44.5, you can add another $3 million of cost associated to a 1% interest rate. We can hit $50 million in a couple, 3 years on this pretty quick if
see
the
that.
voters don't do it.
I got you.
Is
But
that
I'm
not
still
is that not a
it's-
concern to you?
It's a concern, but then again, this project should have been solved in 2016, and from my opinion, from my perspective.
I wish
So,
it was.
Exactly. So, my supporting what you're doing, I get what you're doing, I just can't support it. Because it is not right for Warren County. And it's not right for those of us who are gonna stay here for years and years, who will be slapped in the back to move the services that will be provided by the courts and by the sheriff. All of those services will be moved. And I'm done with us doing things halfway or not at all. That is just what Warren County seems to be the standard of now. And I've been trying to change that, but hitting up against a brick wall. So I'm just not gonna get behind this project. I get why you're doing it. Thank you to some point, but no thank you because my leadership has not been followed. But that's okay, because I will still stand that I am not going to backdoor tax people. I would rather force the previous budget to try to get this done, because it's gonna have to move anyways. So go ahead and build your temporary building, get it done, and then move it to spend as less as you can, if that is your intention.
My intention is to continue reducing costs in the building and get bids in hand so that we can look at it and figure out at that point what's the best viable solution forward. But I guess if between now and then you can put pen to paper and demonstrate that your idea is $39 million or $42 million or $37 million or whatever, I think it would be worth considering.
I've been working on my statement, so yeah.
But I mean, maybe the news would be happy to run an informal poll at 40 and do a heat check on the county to see what sort of response we'd get at $40 million for an off-site location. I think I already know the answer to it, but therein really is what it comes down to.
Maybe I could ask Nate just to work this over a bit. What you were saying is we're gonna potentially put E911, 10 million together with our 20.4. And you would do that I know it depends on what happens with our bids. But, so that can be done in maybe February, March, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you could conceivably wait to issue the E911 bonds. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, is that what you're proposing?
Not necessarily.
Because we can't issue this thing until after we get the bids.
Correct. Yeah,
So-
no, it would be structuring the 911 differently than what you had previously talked about in preparation for issuing the courthouse in the next calendar year. Is what
So
you're
they're gonna
talking.
be separate.
They
They're
would still be
separate
separate.
bonds, but they would be structured to wrap around each
Yeah,
other so that
I
the levy rate
misunderstood. I
stays
thought we put them
consistent.
together.
Not necessarily,
Because
yeah.
I was thinking you got a 20-year and you got a 10-year, and that'd be a more favorable issuance, but whatever.
Right.
Yeah, no,
We
you'd
would
still
still
issue
issue
them
by the end of the
separately.
year
You
for
just,
regular.
it's a matter of how
Gotcha.
you
Yeah,
shape and structure
okay.
them, yeah.
Yeah, it would just be changing what the board had preferenced on the 911, and you would have to decide that now before we issue, if you wanted to do that in preparation for another
Twenty,
issuance
yeah.
of the 20.4.
And we're only in discussion at this point, but
Right.
that can be on a future agenda.
Well, you'll approve the preliminary official statement on the 19th and that information needs to be within that. So, you know, we just need a direction on what you want in that preliminary official statement as far as those terms of how to structure those. If you're wanting to, again, like I said, I can't even get Motorola to give me useful life, so, but.
Let's fix that, we can fix that today.
If you shorten that term and then in preparation for the other, and it's still, it's standalone, it's fine as long as, you know, if we don't issue in the next calendar year for the Justice Center, I mean, it's still, that bond is fine, it's gonna be a shorter term than the, does that make sense?
Any further comments?
None here?
None.
Is discussion from the public? I'm pretty sure in an informal meeting like this, it's okay, so.
Maybe what I'd like to propose is, I do have another meeting at about 10, I've got to leave.
Okay,
So maybe at some time we would adjourn and still can have the discussion, you know,
Okay.
with the public.
okay,
Yeah, it's just that. So can we adjourn now, or do you want to,
okay,
and then have a discussion?
sure.
You don't need to adjourn, you can leave when you need to.
We still have a quorum. Okay, go ahead, Dean.
So I'm just a layman, and I don't get into politics, and I'm obviously not a lawyer. What I'm looking at here basically is you're trying to do the same thing you did on the first vote. You're trying to adjust your cost to what you think the public will accept. We did that the first time, we ended up with 29 million. We were short. If we would have done it to the public for the 34 million, we would not be having this issue. So now we're doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing. It says 60% is the requirement to vote. So how are we going to adjust this to get 60%? Obviously, we didn't get that done. So now we're going to cut how the building's going to be put together to make the cost lower. But the backside to that is what you cut, you're gonna have to add later and put money back in. So to get your passing, you're basically gonna cut it to meet the requirement to get it through. I don't know what you guys are authorized to sign a blank, hey, I'm gonna take $4 million and we're gonna go forward with this. And I don't know where your limit is when you do this thing. If it comes back 35 million, you go, oh, we can get 4 million, we're just gonna sign it and go through it. My heartache with this is, the requirement on this was 60% vote to get the money. The vote did not pass. And put it in perspective, basically if you go ahead by yourself, you're making fun of the system that we put in place for votes. That would be like, Aaron, you know when you got voted in, you had to have 50% plus 1. So we didn't like that, so if we get 48%, we'll say, okay, Aaron, you're in, because we don't care what the vote means. 60%, 50% don't mean 50%. The requirement is 60% to get it passed. And it didn't. So if you put this up against the public, you're gonna tax the people and knock the voting system down, which said, no, you're not authorized this, but, oh, sorry, we don't care what you voted. We think it's better for everybody else, and we're just gonna tax you anyway. And that's kinda how I feel about it. And part of Crystal. Crystal says the building is gonna be moved. You are correct, Aaron, there, building if built will not be moved. But you will probably have to make additions to justify for, we'll say the jail goes to 100, 104, you're gonna have to expand that building to meet that requirement. You're gonna also have to expand that building to meet the requirement for 6 judge things. So that's gonna cost more money. Time frame, I figure it'll be 7 years, but that's negotiable. Everybody can argue that point, whatever. You're still gonna have to come back and get more money. So to me, the bottom line, just kind of toward me, is that you're basically making fun of the voting system that we have. It's not, we don't care what you voted, we're not gonna have to follow the rules, we're just gonna go ahead and go bypass it and get the money anyway. But that's all I can say. See, I made it, and you got 10 minutes to get there.
3 quick points. One, we own land across the street from the square, so you could expand across the street.
Still costs.
2, the county yard cost $7 million for 20 acres of buildable property. So $7 million is probably closer to what land cost is gonna be, but the county yard does not have adequate sewer, does not have adequate electric, and probably doesn't have adequate internet. Then the last item is the incarceration, physically incarcerating the people is going down because you can do electronic incarceration. And they are changing the laws on marijuana and a number of other minor issues to where they're not doing the incarceration. So that probably will affect your future needs for beds.
Yes.
In the beginning, the idea of a justice center, and I went to a lot of those meetings, was ideal. And it was ideal for a bigger piece of property. It wasn't ideal for the square. I held my nose and voted for that one. I couldn't hold my nose and vote for this last one because the footprint got bigger on the square than the first one, and that's unacceptable. You already have a plan for a building. This is not ideal. I'm sure some of your user people would not like this because they wanted the ideal. But everybody doesn't get that. Marion County, Jasper County, Dallas County, none of them have the ideal. You could split that building in half and you can put the courts on the square. The half of the building that has the courts can be on the square and have green space around it, can be something that the people in this town and the downtown center would like. You have a county maintenance yard here in town. I don't know when you're moving, whether it's a year or 5 years, that would make a difference. But you're moving the county maintenance yard, you have the old DHS building site, you have quite a large piece of property right here in town that should be on sewers, that should be on fiber, that should have a lot of what you would need, and room to enlarge if needed after it is once built. The jail does not have to look like the building on the square. I visited the one in Knoxville. It can be a pretty ordinary cement building with a front on it. I think there's people, if you want to put out some ideas and see how the public would feel about them, you might be surprised what they would get behind. And that one may not cost you a whole lot more because you own the properties, you're using the same building design, you would have additional heating and air conditioning unit if you go to 2 different spots. But I think that's pretty minor at this point. But that's an idea that could be flushed out and looked at a little closer and see if that could come in under the budget we currently have.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Kurt. Like I said, I live out in the county, but I had a few questions. And first, I'm going to apologize for not being as up to speed on this as I'd like to be. But so I guess the question I have, and I'm sure you probably have the information in front of you, is what were the most important features when this proposal was first proposed 2-3 years ago? What was the result of the canvassing, the polling, the demographic information that you guys received? What were like the 3 most important features to the people who would be your voters? What did they list as? Where's that information?
We never did.
So, what percentage of people voted in the last 2 elections on this issue?
We have 6,900 and 5,200 for the in
So
2018.
what percentage of the
You're looking at-
eligible voters was it?
Not very
15%?
much.
Yeah.
15%, right?
10
So here's
I think it's
something
under
about
that.
your elections, and you keep talking about this 20% no vote. Your no voters show up 100%, okay? So what percentage of the county is 60 years of age or older? What's the number? You guys know, right? So it's 11.8 people are already retired. 11.8% of the county population is already retired. So sitting there on school board, that's the first hurdle you gotta get over, is if you're retired, it's a very small percentage of people who really wanna pay it forward. I apologize for saying that in advance, but I mean, it is. Those people are on fixed incomes, they're just thinking about how they can get through. So, I guess what I'm saying to you is when you worry about your vote, how does somebody sell somebody a Kirby vacuum for $1,000? How does that happen when you can go anywhere and buy one for $48.95 and vacuum your house? Well, I think it's because they know who's buying it, and then they try to sell them the features that they would like to have. So, since we don't have any actual data, I'll tell you that having been born and raised here, moved away for 12 years and come back because I love the community, I don't think anybody wanted to see all the trees knocked down on the square and there be no green space left after whatever project you went through was completed. So I would throw that up to you. If I were looking to try to get to 60%, I would put out a few figures. One of them would be is what is the difference in going from $38 to $50 million for the average county resident? What is the actual out-of-pocket cost to them per resident? What will it cost me to vote yes for that? Is the difference between $38 and $50 million $10,000 a year on my tax bill? I know it's not. Is it $158 on my tax bill? Is it $1,224 on my tax bill? That's how I'm gonna vote, because $50 million is a figure I can't get my arms around. $38 million is stupid money, right? That's a lottery win to most of the people that you're talking to. So, you know, that 20%, that's probably pretty solid. And your 60%, you have a pretty significant percentage of people to sway. All right? So clarity of purpose and understanding what it is that the people wanted to see are the most important things, in my opinion, about this going forward. The other thing is I think somebody needs to come out and explain how we got to this situation in the first place. Because I'll just tell you this, I spent 12 years in the Navy, and if we had let a building fall into disrepair the way it has, and I understand that there's challenges, all right? Somebody should have been fired at some point over that. That's all I'm just saying. People are interested in how that happened, and they want to know how this doesn't happen again. The other thing that I would suggest to you is that Story County built a new jail. Boy, that's been at least 12 years ago now. And I happen to know a little bit about it because my high school best friend was the jailer at the time. He claims that Story County was cash positive on that building 2 months before it opened because they had rented so much space to Polk County to house inmates. So, I mean, have we examined all of the angles about these facilities? And since we don't have any data in front of us, I would tell you the other thing is, I don't know anybody who is a long-term resident of Indianola who really wants a jail on the square. I don't think we wanted it when there were 10 beds and Barney was locking up one guy for spitting on sidewalks. I don't think we really wanted that. I think, you know, we've all watched enough guys do chin-ups while we're sitting there trying to eat, you know, a meal or whatever, that we're kind of over that. So to put even more people on the square, I just don't think there's anybody who's interested in that. And the comments about sewer and all that stuff, I mean, right off the top, that suggests to me that, you know, I mean, one facility in one location, that may not be the best solution anyway. And lastly, with regards to your news story, you're 100% correct about the news story you did depict. I will tell you, however, that that will not be followed up with anything other than a story about how Waukee is building a school this afternoon. So, I guess in summary, I just think that, I mean, very similar to when we were trying to do the addition to the high school stadium out there. we knew going in, we were gonna get that 14% no vote, because there's about 14% of the people that just don't wanna spend a nickel on anything. And those people are gonna turn out 100%. So I didn't spend any time on trying to sway no voters. That's just a wasted effort. If I can't write a check, or if I am not willing to open my wallet and hand somebody a quarter, there's just no reason to work on that issue. But I think the huge issue you face is that people do not understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. And from all the pictures that have been put forward, no one likes how it's trying to be accomplished. Or I shouldn't say no one, because you didn't get 55. But I'm just saying, there's a lot of people out there. And to me, that number is huge. What is the difference to an individual going from 38 to 50 to 60? I mean, that's just a number that I can't compute in my head, and it's not easily ascertainable for the average person paying their taxes. But that number may not be as scary as a $50 million number. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? All right, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Tracy?
Schultz?
Aye.
DeCook?
Aye.
McIntyre?
Aye.